Howdy, everyone. Welcome back. It's time for another movie commentary. This time, we're continuing X-Men with X2. Sometimes X-Men United, but yeah, just X2. So, as is the usual, procedure around here, if you just want to listen to this on its own, we'll try our best to make sure that everything we say has, the appropriate context. But if you want this to be like an actual audio track for the movie, then what you should do is get your copy to timestamp 0, and when we say now is when we'll all collectively unpause and we'll begin. So without any further ado, get whatever you got going, and we'll begin in 3, 2, 1, now. So I actually can't remember with absolute clarity if the first time I saw this was in theaters or if it had already been like a home release by the time I saw it for the first time. Because my first memory of this movie is seeing it at my friend's house back in grade school, like when I was visiting his place for the first time, and just we adored it. But I feel like I never got to see this movie like in the movie theaters. What about you?
Well, my first X-Men movie that I saw in theaters was First Class.
Oh,
I don't see an X-Men movie in theaters until First Class.
wow. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think now. What was my first X-Men theater experience? I want to say it was Last Stand, but I think it might have been Origins. But yeah, this movie is one that a lot of people our age and slightly older have a lot of nostalgia for, even with all of the controversy that ends up surrounding Bryan Singer and stuff. You often see people with a lot of good things to say about this movie. I know people who don't generally care for this whole series in general who still have at least a pretty decent opinion on X2. I think, yeah, pretty decent is how I would describe it. It's definitely, like a movie and a complete, compelling story in the way that the last one just wasn't. But I'm not quite in the fan camp. This is a lot like Spider-Man 2 for me, which is I see why people really adore it, but it wouldn't be on my top 10 comic book movies of all time list or anything.
No, and we've had so many at this point that's really tough. But yeah, I don't think this quite makes that list for me. But it's really enjoyable, and I never pass up an opportunity to go back to this.
Yeah. And this isn't one that I seek out to rewatch, but if someone were to be like, "Oh, hey, let's watch X2," I wouldn't complain.
Yeah, I see mostly on again FX because FX replays a bunch of movies, especially Fox films, and there were reruns of this constantly as I was a kid growing up, so I would always catch it.
Yeah. And this scene in particular is such a great, super memorable best foot forward for this movie.
Oh yeah,
Because, like we said, the last one operated kind of like a pilot, and it's okay, it got enough people interested to be we'll tune in for what's next. But you get the feeling and be okay, we can't just have the same thing that the first movie was again. You got to give us something. And this movie, this scene is immediately here's Nightcrawler. He's kind of terrifying. He's weirdly scary. This is a weirdly moody scene. His power is really interesting and not something that we'd seen portrayed in live action really effectively well before this movie comes out. And it's also a really cool, memorable action moment coming off the last movie, which, like we said, up until the climax was basically not an action movie at all. This scene is immediately letting you know, okay, we're kind of done with the training wheels that we had on the first movie. This one is an action movie. It has cooler use of the powers. The character designs are going to be a little bit more consistently outlandish and weird, and it feels like we're in new, fresh, bold territory, and we're done being a TV pilot.
Oh yeah, especially with the music, like the I want to say like opera kind of Beethoven-esque music. It's really epic.
Yeah. Ah, God, it's so cool. Like, I love that he pulls the guy into the darkness and you don't even see it. It's so great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And like, we'll have plenty of opportunity to talk about this later, but Alan Cumming's a pretty great casting choice, I think.
Oh yeah, he's a great actor in general. I don't feel like he's in enough. Can't even remember the last movie he was in.
I feel like he's pivoted to mostly doing TV stuff now.
That's terrifying. The
Yeah,
smile too.
and like, I don't really have any strong opinions about the decision to like make him just blue skinned and covered in scars as opposed to furry. Like, I think it's a memorable look,
That's
but
how
like,
I would have thought we would do him in live action anyway. Because he's not
especially at this
Beast.
period in time.
It is skin color. Like he's not Beast where it's like fur. He's never been that.
Yeah, it's weird because in the comics he like is clearly visually portrayed as being blue skinned, but everyone always calls him like fuzzy, and I always interpret that to mean like, okay, he is like he's got like a thinner layer of fur, and it's just not something that we ever visualize. But it's weird. It's just like a weird thing that we always do with him.
And we talked about this coming off the ending of the first film. Um, I mean, just for the sake of he and Rogue's relationship, and really that movie feel like a solid standalone story at all. I really don't get sending him to Alkali Lake when he comes here and then just doesn't find anything. He's like, "Well, Professor lied to me. I'm going back."
Yeah, and it would be more acceptable, I think, if the implication was like he decided to stay at the school and he was like, all right, this is like this is an area of interest to me. I might as well go out for the day, see what I can find, and then come back and it's business as usual. But the way that it's portrayed, it's like he came here, and the only reason he goes back to the school is that he
It's because
finds.
he doesn't find anything.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like this movie, but I still think that's somewhat problematic. Actually,
yeah.
that's pretty problematic for both films.
And immediately we have a better Stormwig, and we're not forcing her to do the accent.
Yeah, that's nice. I do kind of wish that we had our Spider-Man 1 moment of like, you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us, or like the Spider-Man 2 moment where they all like step up to protect him when Doc Ock shows up on the train. Um, with these movies, because like it's very easy to like, people are very like they immediately want to shun what's different to them. That's a very common World War thing that X-Men was always supposed to be an allegory for. But it would be nice to show that not everyone is like that. Like we have our clear cut, some people just hate mutants and some people can accept mutants.
I don't know if I ever needed one of those moments where like we get like a crowd of people behind the X-Men. Like that
Yeah,
would have been
maybe like I'm just bringing those up as references, but like just to show that there are two sides to this. Like that
yeah.
not
Like we
everyone.
eventually get there. Like we start to slowly get there with the McAvoy and Fassbender movies, but for this whole stretch of this series it feels very, very one sided.
Yeah, because it's like Professor Xavier has them fighting to protect everyone and not just mutants. But the question I'd be asking if I was on this team, if I was only exposed to people that hated me, was why.
Yeah. And I think we have like sort of a missed opportunity to have one of those moments later on in this movie when we get to Bobby's family, because like what we do there is totally believable, but it's also unfortunately again like a bit of oversimplifying and like not addressing, okay, this guy's entire family turned on him, or at the very least was not accepting of his status as a mutant. How does that like affect his like commitment to the cause? And it doesn't really seem to.
Um, yeah, because like the overall like villain plot of this movie is for Stryker to turn Cerebro into perversion and like use a twisted version of Cerebro to kill um all mutants. Magneto switched it over to attacking all humans. They actually want to stop that, and I wish they had like a reason as to why, as opposed to, you know, our leader Xavier just wants us to do this, and
Yeah,
obviously it is the right thing, but I just wish that they had like some sort of physical representation that humans are worth fighting.
yeah. And immediately, she still gets some stuff to do in this movie, but we're very quickly sort of like establishing our like disintegration of Rogue as a major player in these movies, where we've got her spending most of this movie hanging out with Bobby and Pyro, whose actual name I forget, and I'm sure it'll come up later. But this scene is all about like establishing the dynamic between the two of them and how they're going to sort of like end up on opposite sides of this thing. And Rogue is unfortunately just kind of there as a third wheel. And like she will get stuff to do in this movie, but it's not a lot. And I feel like that's immediately indicated by the fact that this pretty nicely done character establishing moment she's just there for. She doesn't really contribute.
Yeah, I mean, the most significant, I wouldn't even say it's significant, but the most like memorable moment she has is when she's just sitting there and the douchey guy next to Bobby is like eyeing her up and down like a rag of lamb, and she's like, "Get lost."
But yeah, it's kind of nice and interesting how, like something that's continuing off of a pilot, this movie feels like it trusts that you get the setting and that it doesn't really have to exposit too much about what happened last time, and it feels like kind of comfy and lived in, but also like I said before, you could watch. It feels like a movie you can watch without having caught the last one and not be confused. Like you kind of get what's going on even if you don't like know all the details.
And that was my experience with this movie for at least my first like 5 or 6 watches of it.
Yeah,
Um,
same.
because I didn't see the first one first.
Hmm. Like I mentioned last time, I saw this and the next one before I ever saw the first one. So
Yeah, I guess they even FX got like how that first one was received because like, oh, I say that they showed Last Stand a lot too, and we all know how most people feel about that movie. So,
yeah,
um,
I really wonder if it's just do they think like what we think, that the first movie is like boring and not really a movie, and so they don't show it so much.
I guess like because I imagine for a lot of people back then when it first came out and there wasn't as much social media, it's like people didn't like outright hate it, or maybe didn't like it, but it was one of those movies where like even if you didn't like it, you could kind of have some fun doing what we're doing and just talking about how much you don't like it as you're
Yeah,
watching it. I really like Stryker here, character that
mhm.
we make fairly good use of because he is, of course, the guy who comes up with Actually, no, I don't know why I was leaning to that, but he's the guy who I was about to say the guy that comes up with the Sentinels. No, he's not. He's the guy that has a very strong ties to Wolverine, and the reason why he has amnesia and the claws and all that, and so um he's the symbol of what Wolverine thinks he wants. Um, and as we'll find out when we get to the end, he's like he doesn't really what he wants changes because that doesn't really matter. What matters is what's right in front of him, as
Yeah.
opposed to who he was.
And like it's unfortunate that he will become one of the more recurring characters in this franchise, but he'll be played by different actors who really don't seem to be taking any cues from this performance or this characterization at all.
No, and this is still the best version of him we've had. Like the one in X-Men Oranges is laughable.
Yeah, and the one in the prequel movies, he's not like terrible, but he really doesn't need to be there for most of it.
Yeah, and he's not bringing a lot of gravitas or pathos.
And this is something that has already come up by other people, but like that's probably one of the lines that you should have changed after you cast Brian Cox. Like I was doing this when you were still like a baby, like sucking on your mom's teeth. It's like you're the same age, pretty much.
I mean, I don't know how old they are, but that line always worked for me because he just sells it so well.
Yeah, that's true.
I like the Colossus, like the picture that he drew of them and showed the kid.
Oh yeah, I keep forgetting that's him. Like
Yeah, like
Colossus is
Colossus
part of this movie.
he doesn't really get to be a character in this movie, as opposed to just a glorified cameo. But um, his presence here is certainly welcome.
Yeah. I, I, I'm not even sure how to interpret that. Is that like a step off my girl type thing?
I don't think it's that, because because Wolverine's like cool friend guy. Like if he did see himself as Rogue's dad, it's like he's the cool dad that doesn't care that his daughter is like you know
But I mean, on
maybe in
Bobby,
heaven.
the fact that he tries to like freeze his hand, is that just like showing off?
Oh yeah, he's just showing what his power is.
Yeah, okay.
I thought you meant on Wolverine's end.
Yeah, no,
But
no.
yeah, no. Yeah, he's just trying to be cool there, being a cool guy because he knows that that's essentially her father figure.
Hmm. I'm sorry, man. Still don't buy this relationship.
I mean, it barely gets to be one.
Yeah. And like
Jeez.
it's fine. Stuff like this is honestly fine. Like him flirting with her in the moment is okay. But like we're expected to be invested in this and like want it to happen. And like, I don't.
They need to have more of a love hate relationship because I like the little like your bike's empty and then he throws the key right back and is like fill it up and then walks off and then Wolverine smirks to himself.
Yeah.
Um, like we need more of that. We need more of that kind of like back and forth like kind of love and hate Naruto Sasuke dynamic. I think that would be really like that'd be genuinely compelling and kind of earnest and endearing to watch.
Yeah. And this, oh, I remember finding this just brutal. And like such a great way to establish Stryker as a threat is that in his second scene, Magneto's first scene in this movie, he just walks in and immediately victimizes him.
Yeah, we've got a human who's calling all the shots as the villain in this movie.
Mm.
he looks possessed when he leans up like that.
Yeah. Like with everyone that happens to in this movie, it's like such an eerie effect.
I'll have Gene braid your hair.
Yeah.
Oh
Now,
god, I love that. That's a great joke.
yeah. I'm like now I'm just imagining Logan with cornrows or something.
And that's a great little fun use of powers.
Yeah, and a nice little reminder for the audience that like, okay, his real powers that he's pretty much invulnerable. He can heal from anything. And yeah, see, like stuff like this, like expositing about what Cerebro can do, it really feels like this movie was designed as okay, the first one was a big hit. Odds are more people are gonna see this one, so let's make it a little bit easier to get into.
Uh, this is almost like the Dark Knight of the X Men movies in that sequel that builds upon the first, um, but doesn't necessarily feel like a sequel, and you can watch it as a standalone piece.
Yeah.
Because obviously there are things like him going to Alkali Lake and the pre-existing relationship with Rogue, comparing that obviously to Batman's house being burned down, and now he's now living at like a separate apartment, and the the Batcave is now in a different place. Like you've got things like that, but those don't at all hinder the experience of watching The Dark Knight as a movie. Like it doesn't. You do not need what's come before to fully engage and understand in what's going on now.
Hmm.
And I always like the idea that we obviously as a person with amnesia, you're gonna want to know who you were. Um, but honestly, who Wolverine was not that interesting to begin with. Like he was involved in some wars. He was essentially a soldier. He fought with Captain America. Um,
It's an interesting enough thing, especially for mainstream audiences, as like a character motivation, as like a thing for him to kind of angst over and be. Especially in this movie, as we bring Stryker in, it's a nice thing that actually gives Wolverine a clear, like emotional stake in this story. So I get wanting to focus on it here and like set it up in these early scenes. But it's also a matter of this character, even as soon as we meet him in the first scene of the last movie, like he exists outside of that past, and he seems to have already like, if not carved out a life for himself, at least forged a clear identity for himself.
mhm.
So is it maybe does it seem a little bit odd that he's so fixated on needing these answers now? But then, of course, the argument in favor of that is before he didn't have someone like Xavier who could make that easier for him, so he maybe just gave up.
Yeah, like there wasn't like a cleared place or person that he could go to get answers.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca Romaine has become eerily iconic for this franchise. When you think Mystique, well, I know for hardcore comic book fans, this like in terms of the look, they just prefer her to have the classic white outfit because it just looks cooler.
Mm.
Um, but when you think Mystique, at least cinematically, you're gonna think Rebecca Romijn before you think, um, Jennifer Lawrence.
Yeah, I feel like, if anything, I weirdly feel like
Because
a
we've
lot.
kind of remade Mystique for the Jennifer Lawrence era. Because like that character she's playing is not really Mystique in the
Yeah,
comics anyway.
I think a lot of people I would talk to, if I brought up Mystique, would think Jennifer Lawrence, not because of her performance or because of anything that's actually in the movies, but because of the fact that part of, like, something that those movies now have a reputation for is her, like, disinterest, and, like, kind of the unfortunate stigma that came with her being in that role leads to people thinking, like, okay, not Mystique, the cool character played by this or that actress, but Mystique, the thing that Jennifer Lawrence, like, gave a really bad, like, phoned in performance as, and, like, didn't want to be part of, and that's part of how we define those movies now.
Um, I mean, I can understand that if like you're a younger viewer and you're more familiar with like post McAvoy and Fassbender like in the roles. Like if you're coming at it from like First Class onward, then yeah, she's the only one you've really been watching. And maybe you haven't gone back to these older movies, but um, like in
It
terms of
is
like
also a matter of those movies, for better or worse, really heavily emphasizing her in terms of screen time and marketing. Because
yeah, like
whereas, like,
she was just in the midst of her Hunger Games fame
yeah,
and winning.
like Rebecca
Yeah,
Romijn
so
Mystique is super memorable and definitive to fans of this movie. Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique is like what you'll see if you're just a regular, like, film goer, like Joe Schmo silent majority person who's not super into this franchise but will just, like, see these movies in theaters once. It's like, oh, it's Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique. Okay. I like this. I like this fact that they're not remotely buying, like, this intimidation thing that he's doing. They're just like, okay, let's knock this off. Are you bored yet? And this is such, like, a neat establishing of his actual character. Is like he tries to be intimidating, but then he just ends up looking kind of silly.
yeah. I really like this take on Nightcrawler. It's interesting. It's because I would think you'd, especially like first appearance in film, you'd cast a lot younger.
Yeah, but then again, you'd also want him to be like a contemporary of the rest of the cast, so it makes sense. It's really unfortunate that we didn't ever get to see more of him, because I would have really liked to see this take expanded upon, and, like, given more to do, and, like, us see him in some different contexts, and, like, get more of his personality.
Yeah, because I don't know exactly what the reason was, but he's not in the next movie for really no good reason. Like maybe
Uh,
the actor couldn't come back, or maybe Singer didn't want, not Brian Singer, Brett Ratner didn't want him back.
yeah, no, I'm fairly
Um,
certain Alan Cumming was busy with something is the reason.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. That's unfortunate. Just solid transition. I really like that and even with the first movie, like the brief images that they shot, it matches.
Yeah, like this is stuff that we'll continue to cut to as like even in Days of Future Past we'll be seeing some of this imagery. Like this is really sort of I guess visually the definitive take on this like experiment that we'll get for a long time. Like even
Yep.
after
And
Origin,
then
we're not gonna think of those scenes, we're gonna think of what we see here.
yeah, because even they realize that's a misstep. We should kind of just pretend like it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I kind of have that power, kind of. Not that I can switch channels, but um, it it reminds me of just me being a night owl and watching TV all night.
Yeah. And like I'd like to know exactly what that kid's deal is. Like, is it specifically the TV? Is it any kind of electronics? And like, how does him not sleeping factor into it? It's like, does he have like a secondary power, which is that he doesn't need sleep?
I kind of want to see this more often. This kind of just like mundane everyday use of superpowers.
Yeah. Like even to this day, we see it occasionally, but like not often. Where it's just like, yeah, how would you just use your powers to do stuff just like around the house or whatever?
Something a lot less, like a much like more kind of disgusting and disturbing bottle scene. Homelander heating up a bottle of still-willed breast milk to drink it.
God, yes. And I certainly hope that if this is your first time watching this movie, that you've got no attachment to seeing more of Scott Summers, because after this scene, he's gonna fire off like one good laser blast, and then he's gone for
Yeah,
60-50% of this movie.
he might as well be the female damsel in distress. Like we're gonna fridge him so hard. He's supposed to be the leader of the X-Men.
Yeah, and this is already only his second time on screen, and we're past the 30-minute mark. It's like a lot of times, especially now, actually, you'll see people complaining about characters getting shafted just because certain decisions might have been made in the movie that they didn't care for in terms of adapting them, like aesthetic choices or whatever. They'll be like, oh, they completely wasted this character. At least sometimes, like, say what you will about Hulk or Thor in Endgame, they get stuff to do. They're not given two scenes where they're barely even the main focus of the scene and then kicked out of the movie.
Like I really appreciate this. It's kind of like downtime, like back and forth.
Yeah, and it's
Because
good.
yeah,
Sorry, I was just gonna say it's good to build the rapport with these two characters specifically.
yeah, because he's not gonna actually talk with Rogue almost at all for the rest of this movie.
Oh man,
So
you're right.
yeah, so it's good to give him these scenes with her boyfriend, see where his headspace is at.
Eh. And like we're still even in that scene, we're still using that as an opportunity to like try and push the Logan and Jean thing, and it just feels so weird how not how little respect these movies have for Cyclops. It's honestly kind of gross.
Yeah, Wolverine's like the big ticket. He's what the people love. So we're gonna root for him in every situation.
So Scott isn't like allowed to have anything.
Yeah, no, Jean is Scott's girlfriend, but we're basically, without coming out and verbally saying it, telling the audience that does not matter. Doesn't matter, kids. If you want her, just go after her. She's yours. Even if she's with someone else. I don't know if this is supposed to be funny or not. This is unintentionally hilarious to me when she knocked him out here.
Hey man, Scott got off 2 good laser blasts before getting kicked out of the rest of the movie, pretty much. So, hey, good job, Scott.
He used his power. I'm impressed. Not really.
I mean, like, I don't get it. Like, shooting lasers from your eyes is cool. Why would we not want to do more stuff with him if not only for that reason?
See, it's not cool unless you're not wearing a visor and you can be scarier with it, like Homelander or evil Superman.
I don't even. Ah! Yeah, maybe don't see like a guy in military gear walking up to you and just be like, "Hello."
That's always played as darkly comedic to me. Like, who are you? And then he just remorselessly just shoots the kid with trank darts.
Yeah. Which, like, this whole thing is actually like really terrifying. Like this
And
notion
this
that,
is weird to me that we just make some random girl Kitty.
yeah, especially since a significantly older girl was playing her in the last movie.
What do you mean? Kitty wasn't in the last movie.
No, like the first time I think Logan comes face to face with Xavier, a bunch of kids are walking out of the classroom. The door is closed, and one goes back to get her book, and then runs through the door to join the rest of
Oh,
them.
we did that in the first movie. I did not catch that.
Yep, and it's like a significantly older girl, like Bobby and Rogue's age, like in a blue sweater, and like she shows up in a couple other scenes.
That's so weird to me that we like made made Kitty like essentially an extra, like a background extra for 2 movies before finally casting her and like
And they're
making her a
completely
character.
different ages, both extras.
God, that's weird.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I like how like genuinely kind of terrifying this is, that like not only the politicians who sanction this, but also just these soldiers themselves like view mutants so dismissively that they're perfectly fine just waltzing into a school and tranking like small children and teenagers just en masse.
Yeah, this you should feel despicable doing this kind of thing, and they feel completely remorseless.
Yeah. And like
This is
he's running on so much adrenaline that just does nothing.
yeah, I love it. Classic Wolverine. Also, we're about to get a beat in this action scene that I've always liked, but it plays as really funny, like kind of unintentionally. I don't think you're supposed to laugh when you see it, but
I'm wondering what you mean. I'm not sure. Is it the jumping down on them?
what happens right after that?
Ah, well, I'm gonna see what you, because I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you probably know what I'm talking about. I like that little moment because, like, even though they don't see eye to eye, um, they're like all coming together in this situation. Yeah.
So like he's gonna follow him into danger anyway.
Yeah, it's again, it's the classic Naruto Sasuke thing. I wish that we were doing just a tad more with the characters in this franchise.
Yeah, and like
Like,
that could be a nice parallel to Logan and Scott if we were to capitalize on that.
because it's kind of the Tony and Steve thing.
Yeah. And like, not to write a different movie in my head, but like if we got to a place where at the end of this movie, Bobby and Johnny have gotten to a place where they just cannot see eye to eye at all, and one of them goes off to be with the enemy pretty much, and you could contrast that with like maybe Scott and Logan come out of this movie having a bit more respect for each other. That would be interesting.
Yeah. So this is a pretty iconic comic thing that we do a lot. Just having the school get attacked.
Yeah.
This right here.
Yeah. It's
Like
something
the way
about the editing. Something about
the
the
way he like when he like leans back and throws them, like it looks like he's doing a ballet stance. Like the thing you do after you're done flipping around as a gymnast and you do the whole ballet pose. It's what that
Yeah.
reminds me of.
I really like this track that's playing over the scene. It's like really nice and eerie.
Yeah. You kind of get the sense that Stryker's perfectly willing to recruit Wolverine back
Yeah.
until they're separated. Like, had Iceman not come in and put the wall between them, Wolverine, like, I'm not saying he would have taken the choice, but he would have like offered him, hey, like come back, I'll tell you all about who you were.
Mm-hmm. And that's like a nice moment of continuing Logan and Rogue's relationship is that she's the one who's like, no, we gotta go back and help him.
Like, even though they can't kill him, he's not in any actual danger.
They could like find a way to take him, which would be bad.
Yeah, they could take him, which would be pretty bad. So, yeah. But like there's no way he dies. She's like, they're gonna kill him. Like, do you
And
know
like
who Logan is? They're
this
not gonna kill him.
she gives, which is like he's like, I'll be fine, and she's like, we won't. And he's like, yeah. The other kids got their designated adult, so they might as well have him too.
Yeah. Especially since he can't, like, he can be hurt, but he can't be killed. So they
Yeah.
they need him.
And every scene that Brian Cox is in, I'm just like, he's so good, and I can't help but think of like how beloved the character of Stryker would be as a villain if he was as good as he is in this movie in every appearance he made. So it's like this guy shows up in a lot of movies, but we don't tend to think of the character William Stryker as all that interesting because, with the exception of this one, that's now almost 2 decades old, he's such an unbearable character.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, if every time he showed up he was this good, it'd be like he'd be top movie villains all time.
It'd be like only having, like, because in a way, he's kind of this franchise's Joker. Not in that he's always like the main villain, but he's a villain that we just keep bringing back.
Yeah. He's kind of like Loki in that sense, especially if it being like
Loki's a better comparison. Yeah.
Yeah, like he keeps showing up and like he's always like Loki is like that kind of thing fully realized where there are some people who don't love what we do with Loki later on, but in general, he's always a hit with audiences when he shows up and like people still think of him fondly.
I am kind of done with Loki though at this point. You know how it's been a while since we did that Infinity War commentary, but I hate that they're doing that Loki show. It totally, even though it's a different Loki, like come on, like that totally cheapens and nullifies his death at the beginning of Infinity War.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a discussion for another time, but I know how you feel about that. I like what I like about that Backstreet Boys reference is that we've just reached a point in pop culture where we might have been concerned at one point about that song being a dated reference. It's 2020, and somehow that's still a reference that you could trust people to get.
Um, especially since we're obsessed with nostalgia. Like
Hmm.
Stranger Things comes out, and Hollywood just can't get away from constant, incessant '80s nostalgia. And
And like
eventually, we'll get to a point where we'll start doing '90s nostalgia.
we're already there. We are like now, I would say, with this year, firmly past 80s nostalgia into 90s nostalgia. So particularly that song is like now it's bound to hit even more of a resurgence. Where like we've got stuff like Animaniacs coming back, a lot of 90s properties getting rebooted, Fresh Prince doing a reunion special. Like we're into 90s nostalgia mode now.
And that's so weird because I was born into that. Like I came out the same year The Matrix came out.
Yeah, yeah. It's gonna be real interesting when like a couple years down the line we get to that level of nostalgia for like the era of these movies.
Yeah, like we're talking to our kids. Like I remember when I was a kid and I saw this movie.
Yeah, and like I don't know, like actors doing reunion roundtables for X2 or something. Just that little him putting down the glass, like
As we all would. I mean, it's Rebecca Romaine.
honestly, yeah. And like the decision to put her in that dress is like in a minute, it's such a cool like transition with the effect from the dress to her skin. It's like that's so cool.
And this is the most risque. Well, I remember this being one of the most like risque scenes that I ever saw in a superhero movie. Like this was, I remember like watching this just in the living room at a family member's house, and I was so. I mean, this was nothing for me. I already knew what sex was and everything, but like my folks don't know that, so like this scene happens and they want to shield my eyes.
Yeah, yeah, that was so cool.
Yeah, CG doesn't
Ooh,
hold up great, but like that's as good as they could have done at the time. Like that doesn't feel like a rush job. That's as good as they could have been.
yeah, no. Like I wouldn't complain about it. And like it's easy to forget with these movies because of how memorable and like captivating Patrick Stewart's performance is. He also kind of gets shafted like Scott does, like not nearly to that degree, but like we're still comparatively early into this movie and we're taking him off the playing field for a while. Like it's easy to forget how much of a not actually like big screen presence he is in terms of like the story of these movies.
Yeah, I it makes sense that we don't really have a scene where Professor Xavier like sits down with the X-Men and like talks to them about how they need to protect mutants because that scene would have happened even pre the first movie. So unless you did like a flashback, which honestly kind of no matter how you slice it would have felt intrusive, especially in this film, I don't really get to see like his ideology like not necessarily laid out, but like imbued upon the X-Men team as it currently is. Um, already more or less had that conversation with them. I just wish we could have found a way to do that at some point with this generation, because I mean the only reason that we get to essentially do it in the McAvoy and Fassbender era is because we start with Origin for the team.
Yeah. And like I get why they have to take Xavier off the field because he's just too OP.
Yeah.
And we talked over it, but he's doing the mind control thing with Lady Deathstrike, and it's so hard not to feel bad for her in this movie.
Especially when
Especially,
Wolverine kills her, because you get
yeah,
the sense that like her real self is finally coming through, and then she just dies.
yeah, and it's I feel so bad.
Yeah, and she doesn't really get to be a character, but that's fine because again, that's what makes that moment when she dies so impactful, even though we
Yeah,
don't really know who she is as a person. But
and just like seeing Stryker like in this scene do it, it makes him look even more despicable. It's just like these mutants really are tools to him at best, and he does not view them as human beings even a little bit.
and that leads to one of the best and like not nearly talked about enough fights I feel is Wolverine versus Lady Deathstrike.
Yeah.
The weird little phone thing.
Yeah, like it's really little. Like I'm surprised it works as a phone given how thin it is. Bobby, don't do that. Don't be a creeper. Like I
Like I
know
know
she
if that's me, I just leave the room unless she stops me.
yeah, like that I know that's your girlfriend, but still boundaries. Dang, his eyes are very blue.
Careful, Nick. You sound like Stormfront.
Don't I had to quit while I was ahead. You had like a solid 5 seconds. That was fine.
um,
Like honestly,
this
I'd take that as a success. I'd be like, okay, we can kiss for like 3 seconds, and you'll be relatively fine. Just do that from now on.
this is like a. I remember this being like a funny little button at the end of a trailer.
Yeah,
Wolverine just whipping the claws out and the cat just licking it.
yeah, and it's another good example of like how on edge he is.
This is really funny. Him trying to pass himself off as a professor, looking like this, with a beer that he took out of the fridge. This is Professor Logan. This and that line kind of hits differently. Like, obviously, you and me were both, just two straight dudes, but there's something I gotta tell you. You know,
Yeah, like I'd say even at the time, this movie kind of, or well, these movies, but particularly this one, like with this scene, is leaning even more so than the racial angle is leaning on mutants as kind of like a metaphor for queerness. And like that is present in the comics, but I think this is the first like adaptation to really lean into that subtext.
And it's sad, but I kind of like how real it is.
Yeah,
Because in a superhero movie, you expect them to go like four quadrant, try to appeal to as many people as possible, big fun, happy endings. But his family just doesn't accept him, and he has to accept that and move forward with that.
yeah, and Patrick Willems, uh, I want to say a year or a couple of years ago, did an X-Men video where it was basically just a discussion between him and someone else. I forget who they were, but like a major topic was sort of the queerness inherent to the way that mutants are handled, and what makes mutants such an effective metaphor for like queer LGBTQ culture, even more so than like racial minorities, is the idea that a lot of mutants, some of them can't, but a lot of them, especially the ones who end up being actual members of the X-Men and like major characters in these movies, they can pass for human. It's like their powers are voluntary, they don't really like visually come through in any
Yeah,
way. So like unlike something like race. And again, like you said, the fact that this is his family, this is something that Bobby has to choose to either keep to himself or discuss with people, even people who are like the closest to him in his life. And he has to have that fear of like, they they have known me to be a human being like them for my entire life. If I tell them this about myself, are they going to be able to adapt to that, or are they going to be like Stryker, who's like, my son was this thing, and it turns out he was something else. It's like, that's not my son anymore.
and very it's this isn't necessarily subtle, um, but they're like you can see it like they're trying to pass it off. Like they say we still love you, and it's passed off as a joke. She's like, "Have you tried not being a mutant?" But like they clearly, this is just one of those things where it's he's different, and they don't like that, and they can't accept that.
Yeah, and it's like they are putting in an effort, like not enough to be like commended or anything, but there is like comparing them to Stryker, a tangible difference between like at least being able to say I love you and like we're gonna try and like we're gonna try and like work through this like it's a problem, which isn't great, but it is still better than just straight up disowning them. But it is still a problem, and like something I imagine a lot of people relate to, which is even if your family doesn't outright disown you, it can be incredibly paralyzing and incredibly hurtful to have them go, "Oh, don't worry about it. Like you're just confused, or this is like an issue that's affecting you and not just the person that you are."
Um,
And it's
we talked
so
over it, but that was a really great joke.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
The mutant gene comes from the father, so technically it's your fault. But it's even subtle with the brother to the point where, for years, I watched this movie and like was kind of confused as to why his brother would turn them in. Because where it's like, even his brother, for as young as he is, and like could maybe come out of this mindset, he is just prejudiced, and like you can tell this is a kid who has an idea of mutants, and even if it's his brother, he comes in as like, I'm a mutant. It's like, oh no, this is a problem. I gotta stop this. I gotta get rid of this. This is not okay.
yeah, he can't even bring himself to say anything to Bobby.
Yeah, he can
He
barely
just
look at him.
yeah, doesn't look at him. He spends that whole conversation sitting in the corner of the couch pouting, and then just
Mm.
leaves and calls the cops.
Yeah, and like when I was younger, I wondered like maybe is he jealous as to like, oh man, why couldn't I have cool powers? And like he's trying to get back at him for that. But no, it's like it's clear that he's got the sort of societal bias that is like mutants are dangerous, like the queers are weird, like don't be around them. And like his parents, who are handling it better at least, he maybe feels betrayed. And like this is the thing that we've kind of talked about, like in completely different contexts, but I try to be as tolerant as possible, but I'm also someone who can see things from multiple perspectives, and like it's difficult not to at least like understand the perspective that is like this is your brother, this is someone that you've known to be one thing for your entire life, especially since he's the older brother, and he comes out and says that he's something different than what you thought he was, and it can feel like a real betrayal.
I could see that, especially if you idolized him.
Mm-hmm.
Where he's like, "Yeah, make it fast. I'm not in the best situation right now dealing with this crap."
Yeah, like even before like the cops show up, like I like that bit where like Logan is the adult in the room and he's the one who's like you imagine has more experience with the prejudice. So like Johnny and Bobby and Rogue are like uncomfortable, but they don't realize just how uncomfortable this situation is the same way Logan does.
Okay, like yeah, these cops here are real. Like this is real topical, like police brutality. Like you just broke into the house. Like no one's even done anything yet.
Yeah. And like I know that this is a thing where like these systemic issues with policing have existed for decades, and but like because it's so in the like popular consciousness and it's like an active ongoing discussion now in like the 2010s and 2020s, like see at the time I could imagine someone like myself included seeing this movie when it comes out and being like, man, these police officers, like it's kind of weird that they're so jumpy. And it's like, no, that just kind of happens. Like that's normal. Like quote unquote normal behavior that we're used to at this point.
Yeah, like no one's like what did the kid even say that like they're trespassing? Like you can
He
easily
probably
just come here and tell them to leave. They're
he
not
probably
doing anything.
Yeah, well again, that's another thing of where what he probably said was just we've got mutants in our house and these police are probably like not very tolerant of mutants and are like mutants are dangerous. If they're like in a suburban home, then like they're a danger to these people. Like we got to treat them like they're the most dangerous things imaginable.
Yeah, but like that one guy who takes his baton and breaks into the house to push someone who's
Yeah,
not even a mutant up against a wall at gunpoint. Like, what are you doing?
yeah, like that even more than just the general situation. You're right is like very prescient of now, where it's like someone and like we saw the shot of the brother. Is like this will happen all the time. Someone will call the police for help, and then they'll come in and they'll just make the situation worse and start like brutalizing the people that they're there to protect. So like they get a call to like come and like I guess get these mutants out of these people's homes. They break into the home and like push them up against the walls. Like these are the people that you were here to like get out of this situation. That don't.
I like that. Just the look from him is enough to be like, yeah, I'm not gonna shoot him,
Yeah, he's like
and not
I
again.
shot. He's like I shot you in the head. I guess it didn't work the first time, so I'm not gonna bother a second time.
Wow, and that right there tells me everything. That because like the parents just completely ignore the behavior of the police, and then just go up and like coddle the son who called the cops like he's in the right.
Yeah. And like we don't know how that conversation would have gone after they left, but the clear implication is like Bobby's like, okay, I thought this place was safe for me. Clearly it's not. I can't this like my family is not gonna take me anymore. This relationship is over. And like that whole sequence is like like such a it's one of those things where again, this movie's not flawless and it's not like a movie that I love, but there's so many moments in it that are like that whole thing was so well handled and so well done. It's like it's stuff like that that makes this movie like really really solid at least.
Yeah, and I just have an appreciation for this kind of thing because I don't feel like we see it enough, especially in these kinds of movies. Um,
Mhm.
like it is okay, especially if you're trying to show people a real experience in a fictional context. Like, not everything is going to work out and be peaches and rainbows and turn out the way you want it to. Um, it sucks, and I don't wish this on anyone. But sometimes, especially um, if you do find yourself in a similar like the real life equivalent, obviously, like being queer, and you try to come out, it
Mhm.
might not go the way you think, and you have to be prepared for that.
Yeah. And like if we got a little bit more of the emotional fallout on Bobby's end, I think that would have also been like really powerful is like how do you process the fact that sometimes the only thing you can do is just get out and cut ties and that's really the most healthy thing for you.
Um, yeah, I don't want to like beat this topic over the head too much, but I think it would have been really nice if we had a scene where Rogue, um, like consoled Bobby and really asked him how
Mhm.
he's feeling about all of that.
Yeah, that would have been good. And it's also unfortunate that we don't really have any follow through on Johnny like going full on like crazy and just blowing people up with his fire powers.
And
Toward
then immediately, not immediately, but like in the climax of the movie, ends up going over to Magneto's side. And it's not like
yeah,
he was introduced to us in the first film. Like,
yeah, like that's a part of it that feels a little bit sloppier because like we've been giving that sequence a lot of credit, but there's also the aspect of it feels like the reason that we have Pyro go nuts on the police is to let the audience know that he's eventually going to side with Magneto. And for the other characters and like his relationships in this movie, those implications aren't really talked about at all.
and like he's very malicious with it, really taking joy in it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Like
but on but
before
on
we get to
principle, like
this,
after he shoots, after the police shoot Logan, I don't blame him attacking the cops.
yeah, like I don't blame him, but like the way that we frame that moment, and especially like Rogue makes the decision to like use her powers on him to put him to a stop. Like before we get to this next action scene, there should be like a moment of downtime where we talk about like what you said with Bobby and talk about like that's maybe not how we should do things. Like you went kind of nuts there. Like, are you okay?
And it feels like, again, both me and you like this movie, but I think we could have definitely used. Oh, and we're getting some Phoenix here, some
Mm-hmm.
hints toward the Phoenix. Um, it would have been nice for us to, you know, give these characters more solid character beats and let the movie.
Yeah. Especially Gene, since a thought that I was just having is that like we're pretty much at the halfway point of this movie, and it feels like we kind of lost track of Jean as to where like even with like she's been in scenes with Storm and Nightcrawler, but like those two were the focus of those scenes more so than her. And like
And
now
she
we're getting
doesn't have a real arc in this movie.
yeah.
Um,
So like that moment, like you said, was foreshadowing the Phoenix, and like she's having a little bit of power and continence, but it's kind of weird because that feels like her first actual character moment in this movie, and it's at the halfway mark.
and there's not a ton of there's actually no discussion about the Phoenix here at all, even though that's clearly what that is, especially when we get to the end of the film. But um, this is a pretty cool introduction for Magneto.
Yeah, like his like big back in the game moment.
And I always really dig when we can put the hero and the guy who's typically the villain together, and that doesn't feel like it feels natural for the situation, but it also doesn't feel like gimmicky like crossover movie.
Yeah.
It just that's another aspect of this movie that I really like that we have in the sequels. Like they have to team up and work with Magneto to get Xavier back.
Mm-hmm. And that's another thing of like, this is another representation of how really nuanced and multifaceted the conversation of like mutants versus humans is, because Magneto's like ultimate goal of either turn the humans into mutants or just get rid of them entirely is just straight up wrong. But his perspective is also like, on the other hand, you've got someone like Stryker, who at the beginning of this movie was like raising some valid concerns of like, well, maybe it's a bit of a problem that the school for mutants has like a military grade jet under it. Like, what are these people doing that they're not telling us? We should be questioning these people. Like, this is very suspicious. And yet, also, like, everything about him is just coming from this very deeply rooted prejudice. And he's worse than Magneto, honestly, because he no compromise. Just Magneto thinks of human beings as like beneath mutants, but he still like recognizes them as people. Stryker just straight up does not see mutants as people, wants to eradicate them all off the face of the planet, like ASAP.
And yeah, and it doesn't even occur to Magneto to switch Reverse Cerebro back onto humans until he's finally there.
Yeah, and like that's like a decision that you buy him making in the moment. Like it wasn't his plan from the beginning. It's like he he's such an interesting figure because he's willing to go to that same extreme that Stryker would, but only because Stryker himself pushed him there. And like this wouldn't have occurred to him if someone like Stryker wasn't like, nope, just genocide.
Yeah, I believe he uses this line in the third movie. They drew first blood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's how he first. That's how I believe he refers to the situation with Mystique when she's cured in that film.
And like this is
Yeah,
good. This
Logan, you didn't look hard enough, Logan.
yeah, but I do like that. This is another like good narrative justification for sending him out to Alkali Lake at the beginning of the movie, to where it's like now he's like, oh, I thought there was nothing there, but suddenly I'm hearing that no, there's actually a ton of stuff there, and I just didn't find it, and we're going there now. Like the answers that I want, I might be getting them without having even planned this. And like, how does he feel about that?
Yeah, especially since he's been thrust into a situation where he's kind of just had to put that in the corner of his mind.
Mm-hmm. And suddenly it's like all points are converging to where I was gonna go in the first place. Yes, yes, Logan, she does. She does love him. You guys have talked like 4 times. Ah, I forgot about this.
I hate that she kisses him back too. Like she pulls back, but she clearly kissed him back.
Yeah. And like she's like, "Don't make me do this," and he's like, "What?" And she just says this, and it's like the clear implication there is that if they kept going, she wouldn't be able to stop herself. And it's just like, I'm sorry, guys, I don't buy it. Like that, you just haven't established that kind of chemistry between these characters.
Even if I did buy it, like first of all,
It's
Gene
still
is
real.
too.
It's still real. What's the word? Like real. It's still real bad.
It's skeevy, yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Gene is better than that. Like
Mhm.
comic book Logan, it's debatable whether or not he's really like he sleeps around, like he doesn't
Yeah.
really care. But she's better than that.
Hmm. And like this is
I've always
interesting.
felt really weird about this scene.
It's really odd. Like there's a
Like
couple of ways to interpret this, and I feel like it's a little bit gratuitous.
it's certainly gratuitous, yeah.
And like we got like I think it was Captain Logan who said like probably the marketing reason for it is that like, oh, we can have like shots that we can put on like the DVD case where Hugh Jackman is kissing Halle Berry or whatever. So we've got like our two big A-listers in a romantic scene together. Ah, gross.
It's so weird. It's wrong that she switched into Rogue.
Yeah. Like like this is interesting. Like the fact that she's just prodding him like this and she turns into Stryker and is like, what do you really want? And it's like I want to read into that, but it's also just like, where's that coming from on her
I
end?
don't think there's I don't think there's anything to read into with the Striker thing. It's just, she knows that he wants answers about his past. But a good question to that is how? She hasn't had any interaction with him since they fought in the last movie. How does she know his personal thoughts?
Yeah, I love that. I love that little bit of like she pulls off the glove and it's like gonna go over to him. He's like, "We love what you've done with your hair," and he's just like, "Okay, you want some of this?"
Yeah, that's a cool moment.
I love that line read. Is that what they say?
Is that what they say? Your streets will not be safe. You will not be
They
safe.
say. Yeah, I really wish that we had like a moment between Bobby's house and now where they like confronted him about being so destructive and maybe he was like, well, like I did what needed to be done or whatever. He tried to argue it was justified or like get off my back so that like we could push him away from the others and toward Magneto when he's like, I see what you're doing and like I think it's cool. Like there's one scene of like connective tissue between that moment and this one that I think would make for a really cool arc with him.
Yeah, and like as we're watching it and talking about it, there's moments like that all over this movie that feel like they could have been they could have been really like that much better and like more capitalized on if we just had more scenes of fleshing out some development.
Yeah.
And I think especially in the early 2000s, we're worried about boring an audience, so we kind of leave that stuff on the cutting room floor if we even decide to shoot any of it at all.
That's usually true. But with this movie and like the moments that we do choose to have characters slow down and like actually talk about stuff, it feels like this movie is more confident than that.
You're not wrong, especially since like there's obviously way more action here than there is in the first movie. Um, And yeah, like there's definitely enough to call it an action film, but I still feel like the action scenes are not few and far between as opposed to just far between. Like we have quite a bit of time between action scenes.
Yeah.
So the more I think about it, I think you're right. Those scenes definitely could be there if they really wanted them there.
Yeah. And this whole thing is really clever.
Oh, the fake out is brilliant. I
Yeah.
wasn't even. I felt like an idiot too when I saw this as a
We-
kid,
yeah, when
and
we
like
end the scene, we're like Mystique, like
they
we
end the
focus
scene,
on,
everyone's looking at Mystique, and
and
I'm
yet I'm
like,
still you're still caught off guard by it.
yeah. And how he can tell by just the look that they have.
Yeah, and I wonder if part of that is like a clever use of perspective because we open this scene like with Stryker, and so because he's so confident, we kind of just assume that he's right.
Oh, I didn't necessarily even assume that he's right because it all happens way too fast for me to even make that assumption. Because the
Hmm.
second he says "steal the room, shoot it," he smirked and then switches back into Mystique.
Yeah, this is like yeah, and like you get the
This
impression
is
that, like Mystique is just such a troll that like she
oh
wanted
the
this
the
to
middle finger is great.
yeah, she wanted to like be found out so that she had the excuse to just like show off and make them hurt themselves and leave.
That's funny too.
Yep.
Like there's a metamorph, could be anyone. Smack.
She works fast.
that's that's so creepy. You have no idea.
Hey, I mean, what you get up to with Mystique is your own business, Magneto. Try to keep it out of the plane.
You might as well tell her, yeah, I'm hitting that. You might as well come out and say that.
It's one part cool and one part unfortunate that we don't get to see, like the follow through of Storm, like taking out everybody.
Yeah, because Storm doesn't. I mean, her biggest moment in this movie is when she's in Cerebro. She makes it really cold, and Nightcrawler is there, and he gets like she breaks the kind of like mind illusion that the Sun has over Professor Xavier. That's her one only
Yeah,
big like moment slash contribution to this movie. She doesn't even really get any cool action here.
yeah, and it's like it's a nice little like scene transition of like, oh snap, Storm is gonna take all these guys out, but it probably would have been better to like see her take out a room full of guys, even if it took like 2 seconds.
Yeah, she would have just reused her famous catchphrase. You know what happens to a
Do you know
soldier
what
when it's
happened?
struck by lightning? The
The
same
same
thing
thing
that
that
happens to
happens to
everything
everything
else.
else. Nice.
Can you shut it down from here? No, I can't. If I could do that, don't you think I would? Like the whole like eye rolly attitude was just like, if I could do that, don't you think I would have done that? And this is when Wolverine's like, just gotta divert to get his answers.
Yeah, it's like this is probably the only chance I'm gonna get.
But as Cap talks about, we get his classic opportunity for change when he finally catches up to Stryker. But we'll talk that when we get there.
Yeah.
His son is wonderfully creepy.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Like, this is the third time that this has happened where, like, I'm watching this movie and we get, like, here into the base, and I'm like, wow, I keep forgetting just how much of this movie is left. Because, like, we've got, like, 50-ish minutes left, credits included. Like, a lot goes down here, and I forget just how much time we spend in this place.
And that's a pretty extensive third act.
Everywhere, everywhere. God, this whole situation is just so messed up.
Yeah, it's real twisted. I I really like this. And the twist I think really works.
Yeah.
I just what I again, like I think my biggest criticism, like the biggest criticism I'd probably lob at this movie is us not getting a better sense of, or at least us not showing the gray area of the human to mutant relationship, and that there's no way in hell that all mutants, I mean, that all humans are bigoted and hate mutants.
Yeah, no way.
And we don't really get to see any genuinely decent human beings in this movie.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and it's like, it's not necessarily something that I need because of the way that this story shakes out. It feels like in order to get that, we'd kind of have to, it feels like we'd kind of have to divert attention. Like, we'd have to almost create a whole, like, plot cul-de-sac or a whole different little subplot in order to make that happen and make that part of this movie. It is a perspective that feels like it's missing, but I'm not sure quite how you fit it in here.
Could we do the thing that BBS thinks it's doing with all those stupid random news anchors and just have some people talk about how, yeah, like they're just like us, only they have power. They don't see the big deal. Like,
I feel like we could
government.
get. I feel like we have maybe one opportunity to have done that, and that would have been in Bobby's house before his family shows up. Like, have someone turn on a news broadcast and, like, see some talking heads there.
Yeah,
Or in the mansion
I'm
before
saying
the.
there had to have been some way to work that in here somewhere, just to give us the sense that, like, they because once Magneto switches it over, these people have a genuine like personal reason just beyond it's the right thing to do to fight for the humans, because they know from a personal standpoint the human beings are still worth fighting for.
Yeah.
No, just his withered like no is really funny to me. Like when he looks at the pressure gauge and he's like, no.
Oh, hey, Scott, you're back in the movie. You got
Oh,
kicked out.
I care so much about this.
It's
This
literally he got taken out of the movie at what, like 32, 33 minutes in. We're now an hour and 29. Like we really were just like we want to have like a whole act and a half of this movie without Scott in it.
Scott, something's wrong. I can't put my finger on it.
It's our screen time, Scott. It's going to be even worse in the next movie.
You just talked over it. No.
Yeah, I heard it. Yeah.
I think we do a pretty solid job of visualizing Cerebro.
Yeah, I was gonna say, in the first scene in this movie, I prefer the red to the way that we did it last time, and like the way that it like shades on their faces, and I really like the transition where it's not just that everything goes dark and then it becomes red or whatever. It's the panels on the walls like kind of shrink into the darkness, and then when they're done using it, they kind of like come back until they're back on the walls. Like I really
Yeah,
like
it's a
that.
cool effect. Yeah, it's a really cool creative effect. I really wish that, like, because I don't think, and this is just speaking for me personally, like reading as much of the comics as I have, I don't think Wolverine's backstory is all that interesting. It's really
Yeah,
not.
and again, it's like if the idea is it's not so much that the backstory itself is interesting, so much as it's interesting to watch this person desperate to find themselves, then that's okay. Like the way this movie handles it is about how I'd want it to be explored. Like after this movie, I feel like we'd
Yeah,
be
we don't.
justified in never
X-Men
looking
Origins
at.
is the last movie that we need, and even then, if we were to, like, since we were getting that movie, like, just use this set, use that same actor, like, just
Yeah,
I
like
would have preferred us
I feel like there's
doing it.
really. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say I would have preferred us doing it like out at Alcohol Lake where it was originally. Well, they do it at like a similar place, like a waterfall and stuff, but it's clearly not Alcohol Lake because there's no like snow or frost or it's like a completely different location.
Yeah, I really feel like after this movie, Stryker and Weapon X and Logan's whole backstory was not something that we ever had to touch on again.
No, this is all you had to do with it.
Yeah. And like to sort of briefly again, like we've already mentioned multiple times how unfortunate it is that Stryker becomes a much less memorable character after this movie. The thing is, like, I don't even know if you could sustain the kind of character that he is for more than one movie because we keep trying to use him in the position of just like our basic military bad guy. That's not what he is in this movie. In this movie, he's a straight up monster. And that's what makes him so memorable and interesting on top of the performance. Is like, yeah, he's in the military, but he's not like the anti-mutant guy who's gonna show up whenever we need like the army and stuff. He is like a psycho. He's just like an evil monster. And if you're not gonna go that far with him, then you might as well stop using him.
This fight is absolutely incredible.
Yeah. And
I feel like people. I mean, I feel like people in general, if like when they talk about comic book movies, even this movie, like in general, kind of gets lost. Yet alone this fight in terms of fights, like this fight's really well choreographed, really intense, really well done.
and it's even now that I think about it, got a little bit of an emotional element to it because, and like, granted, we maybe could have done a little bit more to explicate this, but I see it where Logan stabs her and slices her up a bunch, and then she just heals. And part of the issue is obviously he's like, oh no, this is going to be really difficult because here's someone who's like as hard to put down as I am. But it's also this moment of like, oh god, this is terrible. Stryker did this again. Like I just like sort of had these flashes of memory of how traumatic and horrible this was for me, but it's also he didn't stop with me. This happened a second time to this woman, and he did it because she happened to have the same healing factor that I do. It's like if Stryker could have done this a third time, he probably would have. And like it's so brutal. Like
Yeah,
it's ludicrously brutal.
yeah, he wins by the skin of his teeth. And
Ah,
yeah, this is and I really like this because it's what we do a lot in Spectacular. And a lot of Spider-Man's fights in that show, he can't win just by throwing some fists and shooting some webs. He's got to find a way to outsmart whoever he's fighting.
yeah, and like that little, he closes his eyes and he like turns away. He can't look at it. He's like, I did what I had to do, but this was terrible.
Yeah, that's messed up. He can see the soul in her eyes
Mm-hmm.
as she's dying. Like it's messed up. I can understand why some people would find the clunk of her head like hitting the bottom of the tank like immediately funny and snaps them out of the emotion of the scene.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't have that. To me, that's always been like really like haunting is maybe too much, but it's always been really impactful. It's like, oh man, like you had to pump her body full of this stuff. It's like
Yeah, that's rough, but just like she has a metal skeleton, so like her head
yeah,
makes an
it might have
audible
made that
clunk
sound
when it
audible.
hits the bottom of the tank.
Yeah. Although that's also, even thinking about it more, the choice to use that sound effect is also like indicative of okay, now that she's in there, she's probably never like you could not pull her body out of there if you wanted to. She's there forever.
Not unless you have super strength, yeah, or like a giant crane.
Hmm. Oh no, they're pulling a series finale of Alphas on us.
That's a really cool effect.
Yeah.
Her switching in and out of people involuntarily. I was just watching an episode of The Blacklist where a villain was killing people with like this sonic device.
Hmm.
Wish you two were in this movie more.
Yeah, I mean, like Bobby got a lot of good stuff, but like it's starting to hit me now how comparatively little we've given Rogue, and it's like that's unfortunate. And like as we mentioned, there is still a comparatively large amount of time in this movie in which she will get to do at least one cool thing, but like still.
I wouldn't even call that a cool thing. Because we'll have to talk about it when we get there. But as I hear it, she flies the plane around when it really doesn't even need to go anywhere, and then just lands it again, like not even 40 yards away from where it was.
I was fairly certain there was like some hills or like it was gonna be like really difficult to get to it from where they were standing, but you might be right. Let's see.
No, because like I remember very distinctly Wolverine having this dialogue where they finally all get out of the base, and then he's like, "The plane was right here." I'm like, we don't know where. What the heck? The plane was right here. Like they're all
Yeah,
standing where it was, and then she
let's
just
see
lands further and farther away. Like, and I don't have subtitles on my end, so you'll have to see for me like
yeah,
what her thought process is for even moving the aircraft.
yeah, I'll see what the deal is with that.
This is really cool though. Like I like the kind of really like heavy like chorus like gravitas kind of inducing score we were playing there when he was moving all the panels and switching Cerebro.
Hmm. Magneto and heavy choruses go hand in hand.
Oh yeah, and like I always view Magneto as more of a fast bender, because in the comics he doesn't look this old. We rarely ever see Magneto this old. Um, but I'm developing like more of a because like I never not liked him because he was always like pretty iconic in the role from the get go. But I'm developing a more of an appreciation for him now that I don't remember having as much.
Yeah, he's always been my definitive Magneto, which is saying a lot because even outside of the comics, like generally adaptations of Magneto, well, not like the youngest, are comparatively young guys. So, like in the like most objective sense of the word, he really isn't definitive. He's kind of an outlier, but the performance is just so strong that like he's what I think of when I think of the character. Yeah, that real sound of pain. Yeah, the way that we're playing this, it's like clearly there is the indication of like there's more to figure out. But I really feel like in spite of that, this movie gives this whole thing a sense of closure. And I would have been
Yeah,
fine with the future movies not feeling compelled
yeah.
to touch on this stuff.
It gives you the impression that he was like he was when he was working with Stryker, he was kind of like a mercenary.
Yeah. And like maybe just even more than that, just a bad person.
Well, aside from Wade Wilson, and even then, that's kind of debatable. I don't know any good mercenaries. How good of a person can you really be when you kill people for money?
Yeah. And when you volunteer for something that'll give you like giant knives in your hands. It really does sound like you said there are no exits that way, Wolverine.
uh, I love like iconic, unintentionally funny lines like that.
Yeah.
There's a not to get too far into something that's completely unrelated, but in Fast and Furious 6, um, Michelle Rodriguez's character, she's going through amnesia in that movie, and she's like she has this thing with Vin Diesel's character where she's like, yeah, I can't really. We should stop trying to be together because you see me as the person that I was. I'm not that person anymore, and I'm never gonna be that
Hmm.
person. And then we get to the end of the movie where he's in this car accident. It looks like he's dead, and we all know he's not dead. But she's like holding his lifeless body, and she starts crying, and she's like, "I remember now. I remember everything." And me and my friend will like casually like mock that and like tell each other, "I remember everything."
Ah, yeah. It's occurring to me that like we're gonna get our big character moment for Nightcrawler here, and it's like there's a lot to appreciate in this movie, but I do feel like it's held back by the same thing that held back the first movie, which is like with the exception of Logan and the like sort of token characters in his orbit that we've chosen to like make a big deal out of, the actual X-Men team still feels very scattered and like with not a lot to do. And it's unfortunate because on the occasion that they do get stuff to do, it's memorable and it works, but we're still in this place where like we're in kind of an ensemble movie where most of the ensembles not being utilized as well as they could be.
Yeah, and like this whole thing feels like payoff to like it's a great moment, but it doesn't really feel earned. Even though we got that great scene with the two of them in the copter, it just feels like they needed like one more scene or two.
Yeah, and like we get that bit where he's like, I can't just go wherever, I could end up stuck inside a wall. And it's like, okay, he brought that up, but we don't really get a sense that like he's really afraid of that happening or that he's like lacking confidence that like he could pull it off at all. So like that could have landed more with like some more outside like setup.
Yeah,
You gotta wonder if this little girl was ever like thinking about the implications of this role as she was playing. Is like, I'm gonna be the character who convinces Professor X to commit two genocides.
never before has there been a more evil kid in cinema. Yeah, this that whole thing, I feel what you're saying with that. Like we definitely needed more scenes with Pyro and Bobby fleshing out their whole
Yeah,
dynamic. That's the problem um with doing this premise in movie form is you only have but so much time. And like me personally, I don't mind long movies as long as you're earning it through solid and engaging character development. Like,
yeah, and like we because we effectively set up that like Magneto gets him, and he's like fine with like being adjacent to Magneto, but we haven't pushed him away from the others enough or at all. Because like
yeah,
nothing at all in this movie really happens. There's no conversation, there's no disagreement, there's no real actions to the effect of like him and Bobby and Rogue and the others kind of like having a schism. And when we get to the next movie and the next time that we see these guys interacting, they're going to be treating each other with like straight up animosity. And it's like, no, you were still friends the last time we saw you interact. So like what happened?
yeah, it's like I don't know, maybe have some scenes where you're like uh your your folks totally abandoned you and tossed you out like you were garbage. Why would you bother defending humans? And it's like because not all of them are my parents.
Yeah, and like
So,
also,
you know,
okay, my parents were terrible, but you blew up a whole bunch of people who didn't do anything yet. So
uh let's not what prompts that is one of them just shooting Logan
yeah, but
after
I
he
mean,
did
I'm thinking
nothing.
from Bobby's perspective of like that one cop did that, yes, but then a bunch of them drove up and hadn't done anything yet, and he like let's be real, probably killed a bunch of them.
And the only reason Logan's not dead is because he can heal. Like,
I'm just saying, there's enough there to where like not just Johnny disliking Bobby's perspective, but the other way around, and like we just kind of let the audience assume that that happened, but we never touch on it.
yeah, that's that's really weird and unfortunate because we definitely hit in Last Stand like this like tail end of first Naruto series or Naruto and Sasuke or they're not friends anymore and Sasuke's off to
Yeah,
become
you're
a
right.
member of
Where did the
Orochimaru's whole thing and like they have this yin yang thing or like they even do like both like energy blast and it's like in
oh
the
no,
middle of like the
I see what's happening. Sorry, I don't want to, but like we're at the rogue thing. Like yeah, the plane was farther away. The plan was to use the helicopter to either get to the plane or just fly the helicopter out of there. Magneto and Pyro and Mystique took the helicopter, so Rogue had to fly in with the jet.
Gotcha. Okay. That's cleared up for me now. Okay, that's not really an issue. Oh, that's why he says the I feel so stupid. The helicopter was right here.
Yeah,
They're supposed to get in the helicopter.
get in the chopper.
He just starts talking like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't want answers anymore.
Well, probably not actually, Scott. She's probably not actually going to be fine.
And I don't love how we get Jean to where we get her.
Yeah, again, like she's it sucks to say, but like people are gonna well did rightly complain about how we handled the Phoenix come next movie, but it's unfortunately like partly on this movie is also a problem of just like this is our big Phoenix setup. Like we end this movie with the big oh the Phoenix is coming. Okay, fine, but Jean was still barely a character in this movie, so
Yeah,
beyond like being an X-Men comic fan excited to see Phoenix, like what really is there to entice me to get hyped for that plot development in these movies?
honestly, nothing. Because she's not a character. Oh, she's not a character.
Yeah, like really she's had one defining character trait throughout both of these movies and it's been like she is entangled with Scott and Logan. Like that's it. Like she cares for Scott. She's maybe got like a primal attraction to Logan. That is the extent of her character. Yeah, like yeah, we should have had a moment of like everyone else like talking about what happened with Pyro, but whatever.
It was we talked over it, but it was nice to see Logan realize that he can let go of his past, doesn't even need to know the full picture, and has chosen the X-Men.
Yeah. Now, if only these movies would learn that lesson.
Because honestly, that's where I am even as an audience member. Because I mean, again, I can't pretend like I don't know the comics, but I don't care about Logan's backstory.
Yeah, like I care about it to the extent that it's a thing that like I can empathize with his character feeling like, oh man, like I had a whole life and it's just gone. Like, how do I deal with that? But it's not something that I need to see ever.
Especially because it's not like he had a Peggy, at least one that was even still alive, regardless. Like, there is no one from his old life to even go back to except for Sabretooth, and even then, we don't use him after the first movie, so.
Yeah. Yeah, like this is such a big moment and like it's a I'd argue the definitive moment of this movie for a lot of people who like really really love it, and it sucks that it just doesn't feel earned because we haven't gotten to know this character, care about her really.
That's kind of shocking to me, because even as far back as like 4 or 5 years ago, I would have said I loved this movie back then. And it was
Mhm.
definitely not because of how he ended.
Yeah, I won't say it's the definitive scene because I feel like for most people the definitive scene is actually the opening. But it's like this is a movie with a lot of memorable moments, and this is one I hear people talk about often. Is like, oh man, like I was so excited at the prospect of getting the Phoenix, and like when Phoenix sacrificed herself, it was like so heroic and so sad. It's like I can see,
I'm not feeling that at all because I don't know this iteration of Jean. I don't
yeah,
know who this person is really, aside from the fact that she's only kind of sort of faithful to her own boyfriend and is, other than that, kind of genuinely a nice person. Aside from that, like I'll make out with other people for a little bit, but only for like 30 seconds, and like I'll flirt with other dudes. Like it's weird, and I really like. I'm hard pressed to say I don't like this version of Jean, just because we don't even get enough of her as a character for me to say I don't like her.
I don't
But I don't
dislike
like
her,
us.
I don't like her.
Yeah, I don't like us flirt with infidelity. That's never like cool or hip.
I will say that that was another great piece of the score, though.
It was. Um, I see us like she has to bring out the power of the Phoenix to just float up the plane, and I I well, I mean, I get it. She has to hold back all of that water. Um, I Something just kind of rubs me the wrong way about this scene and her having to even resort to using the Phoenix, because it's not. If you're not a comic book fan, you don't know what the hell that red aura even is.
Yeah, I will say another thing of like weird. I get missed opportunity, like again, shafting Cyclops going into the next movie. I would have liked with the way that we played this scene if like grief over the loss of Jean were something that were to bond these two come the next movie. Because like the way that we played this moment, it's like the only moment that they've had where they really like emotionally commiserate over anything. Where
Yeah,
like
they both lost Jean.
yeah, and like Logan is the one who's like telling Scott like she's gone, and like he's helping Scott like accept and process it as he has to do that for himself. And it's like they've done nothing but snipe at each other over two movies, and yet in this moment, Logan chooses to help him with his feeling. And it's like that feels like it should be the jumping off point for they actually have a relationship next time we see them.
And we kind of just, it weirdly feels more or less the same, but Gene's not present for them to squabble over.
Well, like, what we'll do in the start of the next movie is that we'll do basically the same thing, except Scott's like completely shut himself off. Where I actually do like that in the next movie, Logan's like, he's sincerely, sincerely, like empathetically going to Scott, like, maybe it's time that we move on. And Scott's just like, no.
Not everyone moves as fast as you.
Yeah, not everyone heals as fast as you do, Logan. And like that, I thought was a good moment, but like, I guess we just didn't want Scott to be in the rest of them. No, it's right because Superman Returns, because that
Yeah.
actually.
Why would you? I just don't get why you would do that when you just cast anyone else, especially for the role he serves. Could have been anybody.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't
Well,
need
then
to yank him out of yet another X-Men film.
maybe it was also he really just like wanted the work, and like he'd already been shafted twice as Cyclops, so that wasn't a big priority for him.
Yeah, see that I understand. Like as an actor, like yeah, like I'm barely a character in these movies anyway. I'm just kind of here. Like I get a paycheck, and then I'm like on set eating donuts for most of the days. I barely film any scenes.
It'd be like in Wolverine and the X-Men. Everyone's off doing their own thing, and Scott's just there lounging on the couch, eating stuff. It is also kind of a threat, though. Professor X is like, "This is not a threat, Mr. President. This is an opportunity. We are still going to end with like we'll be watching, so it is kind of a threat."
Yeah, it's not the. I mean, and it's very atmospheric with the lightning and everything, and it's dark. Like you're not. You obviously don't want him to be comfortable.
Yeah, you're straight. You're using intimidation tactics, whether you realize it or not. And, like, to like emphasize it, like, come on.
Let me know how you feel about this. I think, and Stanley has always said, Marvel is always supposed to mirror the world right outside your window. I really don't think. Um, I mean, post post Nazi era, obviously, because Magneto comes from uh why am I blanking? Holocaust. Yeah, he comes from the Holocaust era. But like post that, there's kind of no good reason for us to use real presidents in these movies.
Yeah.
So I'm just glad we did do that. It always struck me as weirdly odd when like those few times Obama showed up in Marvel comics.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I mentioned that again. Like all roads lead to Patrick Willems, I guess. But on his Marvel podcast, one of their more recent episodes was about that subject, and like, does it does it put like your comics in a weird storytelling place to have real world political figures be part of that whole thing? And like, does that limit you in some really unnecessary ways?
I think it does if you're gonna at all try to be faithful to who those people really were slash are.
Yeah. And yeah, like I really like this, what we're doing, where it's like Logan is being mature and like recognizing the situation that they're all in. He's choosing to do what will make Scott feel better. And like that never gets to the chance to go anywhere is unfortunate.
Yeah. It's always kind of hard nailing the balance of seeing the school be a school and telling like a fun X-Men adventure.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this movie does. I mean, we don't see a ton of teaching, um, but it's solid enough for me to buy that it's a full form like functioning school, and the kids actually want to come here.
Yeah, after a while, that would be the question that you ask yourself: is that even with the idea being that, like, okay, this is a place where you can come and we're accepting of mutants and you'll be safe here. At some point, you got to be okay. Will I? Because stuff keeps happening, and like, even if it's not directly at the school, like this school staff keeps getting embroiled in like life or death situations. Would that maybe be a deterrent to like mutant kids being like, this is a place that I want to go to? And like, we never quite addressed that.
Well, that depends on how much of the X-Men's exploits are actually common public knowledge.
Yeah, true. Mhm.
Because their jet is still completely invisible when they go to the island at the climax of the last movie. I could buy that. I mean, we don't even see any helicopters or anything show up to like film what's going on over there. So, um, like, yeah, obviously, no one knows about them interfering with Magneto's whole plan there, and obviously, nobody knows. I mean, because that school is fairly, because it's essentially a private school. It's not a public school. There were no news copters. Like, no one saw the school get attacked. Obviously, nobody saw the situation go down in Alkali Lake. So, really, there's no good reason for people to have a public opinion of the X-Men because they're more like a special ops unit. Um, they don't really. They're not the Avengers just blowing shit up in the middle of Times Square. Like, they're so far their scenarios have been out of public eye.
Yeah. But yeah, that was X2. And reflecting on this movie, what actually just occurred to me is that like a what I think would be a good modern comparison for it would be something like Spider-Man Far From Home, in the sense that like I think like that movie, this one has a pretty strong, compelling narrative through line, a protagonist with an arc that I'm invested in, and a villain that really, really works. But it's like sort of hindered and kept from greatness by a lot of these surrounding weak elements. And like there's a lot of great sequences, but there's also like side characters who feel like they should have more to do or aren't utilized properly, and like ideas that aren't fully fleshed out, and like stuff that's on paper really interesting but is missing a lot of connective tissue. And like I think this move, the like we said at the beginning, the key word I'd use to describe this movie is that it's solid. Like just barely so, but it's got enough good in it, and its foundations are strong enough in terms of like the central themes and storytelling that it's like, yeah, this is a good, solid movie to like put on and enjoy. As that it was ever like in contention as one of the best of the genre, I think speaks more to how weak the competition was at the time, though. And like, I don't quite think it's as monolithically great as it was treated for a while. And when we get to the next movie, I feel like a lot of animosity toward that movie is born out of how great people saw this one as being. And I don't think it's quite there, you know?
Yeah, especially now that we've talked through it, it's definitely not. quite as good as I held it in regard as being, but it's still solid. It's still a good movie and well worth watching and revisiting if you ever find yourself in the mood to go back and watch an X-Men movie.
Yeah, like we everyone at this point I think agrees that in this series of movies you can do worse than this one.
Oh
And
yeah,
like,
we're about to get worse. We're about to get in and I mean Last Stand is kind of it's a fun bad. It's not boring. it's wouldn't call it boring. It's kind of
Last
I
Stand
think
is like we're gonna get to this when we talk about it, which might be tomorrow or whenever. But like I said in the video that I did semi recently on The Last Stand, it's like I think the problems in that movie are so like heavily like how much it deviates from what we set up in these first two. So like if you don't put these first two on a pedestal, that'll help you accept Last Stand better. But it also has its fair share of just straight up narrative weaknesses like this movie does.
all right. Well, I look forward to us tackling the next movie.
Yeah, so thank you all for listening, and hopefully fairly soon after this, you should hear us talk about Last Stand, and look forward to that. But until then, talk to you later.